Fresh off of 8 hours of live streaming is Nate the lawyer to talk us through the Ahmaud Arbery case. Nate, if I understand correctly, we are now at the prosecution's point for closing arguments. I just saw that the jury said they wanted to go home, so we're going to finish that up probably tomorrow.
Yes.
I don't know anyone else who has been as attuned to this case as you. Like, I don't know how you go to the bathroom. Maybe we could talk about that. But yeah, tell me what is it like? Just curious before we even get into the case. What has it been like? Because you were following Rittenhouse and now Arbery. What is it like being a YouTube lawyer who is trying to help the public understand these cases in a way that they may not be getting when they're watching 90-second stories in corporate news outlets?
One of the biggest issues is that when you're in independent media like we are, it's hard to take a lot of that, like all that information and distill it into those quick 15 or 10-minute videos. And I think that's the benefit of doing YouTube. But the biggest issue I find is that the corporate media, what they do is they rather have a narrative than the facts. And a lot of times the narrative and facts don't match up. Like with Rittenhouse, for instance, Rittenhouse's the narrative was white supremacists, killed black people, that type of thing. But that was far, far different than the facts. And the same thing here with the Arbery case is you have, a media narrative or just the regular person who may hear something and then the reality of the situation. So when I come in and I look at this stuff, like when I live stream this stuff, most of the fight that I have or the things that I have to really achieve is just really deprogramming people from the misinformation they have and say, hey, here's the real information on the case. Here's what they're testifying to. And it's just like, that's like the epiphany, like, oh, wow, this was really about self-defense. Yeah, if you know what you're looking for.
Do you think it's harder to, I guess, to educate people about the law and these cases when they have so much publicity, because people may come with like an already, I guess, preconceived notion about it that they're really emotionally attached to or politically attached to or whatever. And so they're maybe more hesitant to listen to somebody who has a different perspective on it?
110%. And especially I think with these two cases, because a lot of people have come because they have quality sources or what they believe are quality sources telling them these bad facts, right? This is ABC News I'm talking about with Breonna Taylor. ABC News went and said the warrant was for the wrong home, right? And until I actually showed people, here is the warrant. This is her address. It's literally on the warrant. It's hard to deprogram people because there's a level of trust with the media. But even though most people know the mainstream media is BS, there's still a level of trust that when they say something that's a factual matter, that people believe that. And I think that's the biggest hurdle, is getting people to trust, not even me, but trust the documents and evidence in front of them. Like, hey, here's the evidence. You don't have to trust me. Just look at it for yourself.
Okay. And tell me also, when you're going from one very high profile case to another very high profile case, and they are being handled somewhat differently, I guess, in the media. Are you getting different reactions from people? Because I know even in the YouTube world, it's hard to push back, I think, sometimes on that tribalism that even corporate news, I think, enhances or agitates. And so I'm curious, are you seeing different people interested in Rittenhouse versus Arbery, or is it the same crowd but they just have different thoughts on it? How is the audience breaking down?
Well, it's interesting because most of the people are interested in the cases themselves and the intricacies of the cases. So that's one thing I love about the fans. The fans really like to go behind the curtain in the law. But I do see a split, and I see a split when it comes to where you're getting your information from, right? So if you're getting your information from like the Young Turks, I'll have, I have like, that's why I have to do these videos against the Young Turks, because all their fans watch my stuff and they'll come and they'll say, Nate, you're lying, with this, all this stuff is wrong. And I'm like, no, this stuff is right. And here's the source material. Then they find out that the Young Turks are wrong. And then it's like, oh, we've been fooled all this time. We've been fooled for years. And the same thing on the right. Like even with this Arbery stuff, there's a prominent YouTuber who's saying wrong things about the law. And I say, well, no, here's what the Michael's attorney said, right? He's saying the different thing, and then that's when you get this. So it's my channel is really designed, or I try to design it to do two things. Number one, take all those assumptions out. And one of the biggest assumptions you have to take out is just race. And even with the Michael's case, is a little hard. But when you remove race from the equation and say, we're going to take these set of facts independently and see where they come out, and just really focus in on what the facts are in this case. And 99.9% of the time, the audience, even if no matter, you'll see it in my comment section a lot, people will say, well, I thought it was this way based on these facts, but now that I know the actual facts, I agree with you. Kyle Rittenhouse, for instance, he should be found not guilty, versus an understanding that and I think that is the best thing that my channel does for this community, for my community. It at least allows you to, even if you don't agree with me, you can understand where I'm coming from. And that's, I think, the most powerful part about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that people, the ones who show up with a good faith posture towards it, are interested in learning. And what bothers a lot of the people I hear from, like in my comment section about legacy news, is they just kind of shove a narrative at you and just say, just trust us, versus like, let me show you how I got there. Of course, in a lot of cases, they're not necessarily even given the time, even if they wanted to do that,
Yes.
to allow for that kind of discussion. But I do think that transparency goes a long way. I wanted to play the beginning of your video so we can talk real fast about this.
Sure.
Okay, this is your video from, I think, Saturday?
Yes. Okay. So today, we had two cases end. Two cases ended today. The Ahmaud Arbery case ended because the defense's theory of the case was wrong on the law.
Judge, if you charge the jury the way you're contemplating, you are directing a verdict for the state.
Okay, I gotta say, I love your intro. What just happened there? I watched the video and it seemed like basically, well, you know what? I'm never gonna sum it up. You tell us, Nate. What happened there? Why did he say that he was directing a guilty verdict for the jury?
So what happened in the Ahmaud Arbery case? The key facts of that case are simply the McMichaels, who the younger one killed Arbery, and William Roddy Bryant, that's the person who was helping them. They were trying to arrest Ahmaud Arbery for a burglary that had occurred 2 weeks prior. So they were saying, well, there was a burglary that occurred 2 weeks prior, and we see Ahmaud Arbery today, so we're trying to arrest him for that burglary today. So they were relying on Georgia's citizens arrest law. Now, so we all are on the same page. If I want to arrest or detain another citizen, I have to be legal. I have to be legally allowed to do it under some state statute, right? I can't pull out a gun and say, "Stop, come with me," because that's what they call. That's what's known as false imprisonment, a felony. So if I'm going to violate your constitutional rights, your freedom of movement, I have to be legally justified in doing it. Even the police have to be legally justified in doing it. So in Georgia, the self-defense, the citizens arrest statute, the way it lays out is it says that citizens can make arrests, but only in a very narrow circumstance. And the narrow circumstance is if misdemeanor or felony is committed, and it's committed within your presence. So if you know what's going, if you see it, or if it's happening, in your what you have immediate knowledge, or it's happening in your presence, then you can arrest the person, right? If it's a misdemeanor or felony. But then the second sentence here says, well, if it's a felony, then you can chase the person if they try to escape. So if I have somebody, let's say, for instance, at a department store, and that person shoplifts and picks up something, and that's a misdemeanor offense. If that person starts running away, the law says, well, I can't chase them, right? Because it's just a misdemeanor. I could arrest them if they're in a moment I got them, I can arrest them there. But if they start running or escaping, I can't chase them. But if it's a felony, well, still, I have to still witness it and be there. But if the person starts running, then I can chase them. If it's a robbery, for instance, I can chase them. But so the McMichaels' argument, their whole defense was built on the fact that they didn't have to have immediate knowledge of the crime. So they were saying that, well, we don't need to have immediate knowledge of the crime at that moment. We could arrest somebody for something from 2 weeks later. But when the court looked into the case law of this, the court found that your right to make a citizen's arrest extinguishes if you don't arrest the person in the moment. So, and the reason why that's important is because, let's say, for instance, in this case with Arbery, let's say that day he committed this burglary, allegedly, but that day he committed the burglary. The next day, the police got him. The police actually found him and arrested him. And then he pled guilty to the crime with the DA, and the DA put him on probation. And then 2 weeks later, the McMichaels now see him again, not knowing that all this has happened. Does that still give them this right to for an arrest? Can they still arrest him based on that probable cause? Well, no, obviously not, because that case has been done. So that's why Georgia's arrest by private persons law only allows you to arrest the person, citizens to arrest the person in the moment. With police officers who are sworn, they can arrest somebody later or chase someone for misdemeanors and all that stuff, because their rights to arrest are more broad. So the defense's whole case was predicated on the fact that they didn't have to actually witness the crime in a moment. But the judge, in this video, the judge makes it very clear that if you don't witness the crime, or if it didn't occur in your presence, then your citizen's arrest is invalid. Now, this is the weird part here, is that the defense for the past 2 weeks have been arguing that the crime didn't happen in their presence or within their immediate knowledge, literally saying the first sentence didn't apply to them. So they argued that for two weeks straight. And now at the end, they find out that they've literally, and this is wild, but the attorneys have literally been arguing that their clients have been guilty for 2 weeks and have not realized it. And that was the big bombshell on Friday. They've been arguing their clients are guilty, didn't even realize it.
So whose fault is that? Is that just like, well, our judge went rogue, or the defense attorneys are unprepared and don't know the law? I mean, how did that I guess, how does that even happen?
Well, it seems like, don't forget, there's 3 defense attorneys on that side. There's,
right.
Each defendant has their own attorneys. I'm thinking the defense attorneys, their mistake was not getting the clarification on what the law was before they started arguing. They kind of went in there with that assumption of just, we've read the law and we understand what it means, right? You need probable cause, you need this. But they should at least got a stipulation or something with the judge and say, okay, hey, how are we supposed to interpret this law? Because we have to put on a defense. Instead, I think they went through the whole trial not really knowing it, and they took a gamble. And then at the end of it, they said, guess what? You were reading the statute wrong, and it doesn't read the way you believe it reads. So,
okay, well,
life sentences for misreading the statute, right? Life sentences for your clients.
So, has there been any, as you've been watching commentary on this, have you seen people understanding that caveat in the legacy media, or is it a conversation that's being broken down mostly by independent lawyers like yourself on YouTube and elsewhere?
Well, to be honest with you, I think the news media is they don't understand the significance of what happened on Friday. And I've been looking and scanning, but they haven't. Nobody's even mentioned it, right? They literally haven't mentioned that the defendants have admitted guilt in the case, unknowingly. But what I have seen is independent lawyers on YouTube who have recognized it, and other people like Actual Justice. What's it? Actual Justice Warrior. He's seen it. Robert Barnes, for instance, has mentioned it and said, "Hey, these guys have admitted guilt for the past 2 weeks." So, but again, that's why I keep saying it really depends on when you get your information, because I think the Arbery case is good for the media, as long as it's one of those, look at Arbery, look at this black person getting screwed, in the court system. But then a day that's really good for Arbery, it cuts against that media narrative that the justice system is skewed against black people all the time, right? Because you got Rittenhouse who won, but then you got Arbery who won, and it's like they're trying to figure out what to do with it. Because I'm assuming when Arbery eventually, when his killers get convicted, it's going to be interesting how the news media deals with it, because don't forget, they've been telling us for the whole past week how the court system is so corrupt and so racist. But then now we're going to go, they're about to put away 2 white people for killing a black man. So I'm just going to love to see how they deal with that.
I think sometimes too, with the corporate news, where you have a bunch of people who don't really have anywhere near the depth of knowledge that somebody like you does, what's significant to them may not be significant legally at all. And what's significant legally, may not be significant to the news, So because, like, for instance, for them, I could see them thinking it's very significant, and it is probably, I can't remember if it was one or both of the guys used the N-word during that incident. But so that would be something the news would like really jump on, right? Because they understand that, and but then they would totally miss. I could see how they'd miss something that requires, the ability to understand law and interpretation of law, and I think sometimes people think that the narratives that get spun in corporate news are the mastermind brain schemes of very high functioning, intelligent, well planned propagandists, when that exists, I believe, at the top. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think the vast majority of people who are like doing the day-to-day stuff are just running this hamster wheel, and they're like, I understand that, and it sounds bad, so I'm just gonna, and this sells. Like, this people clicking on. If I start talking about law and it's complicated and all this stuff, are people going to click on the headline? They're not going to eat. And it boils down to a lot of those basics. Like, how are you going to get people to click? And do I even understand it? And those two things together, that becomes a reality, which is unfortunate, because it then turns into, in many cases, these oversimplified narratives that then drive real world consequences in different parts of the country where there's unrest based on narratives that may not in fact be true.
Well, we have the perfect example of that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And I think most people haven't realized that whole thing was actually the media narrative caused the Kyle Rittenhouse issue. Jacob Blake, right? We had the whole Jacob Blake incident. He had a felony warrant, 3 kids in a car that he was essentially kidnapping, and he's carrying around a knife, wrestled with police, reaches his head in the car under police telling him stop. Totally justified shooting, right? If you just take 5 seconds to look at the facts of the case, you find out it's totally justified. The media ran with that case, black man shot in the back, and all of a sudden, we got BLM protests all over the place, right? In Kenosha, Wisconsin, the police are bad, not knowing all the facts, right? The first facts that came out, black man shot in the back on camera, film at 11. It's like, what just happened? Now, if you're hearing that for the first time and just looking at the way the news media reported in those first 24 hours, that's what caused those riots. That's what caused 4 or 5 days of riots, because people really felt like, oh my God, this thing is happening again, like the George Floyd incident. But it happened all to be a lie. And then the news media, to double down on that lie, they started lying about Kyle Rittenhouse. Now he's a white supremacist. None of that was actually true. And even to the point where even the event that's caught on camera, right? Caught on camera of Rittenhouse being chased by Rosenbaum, and Rosenbaum lunging for his gun, cornering him and lunging for the gun, that turned into Kyle Rittenhouse changing Rosenbaum and shooting him in the back. That's what we're talking about. That's the dangerous part of allowing the news media to go unchecked like it is. And that's what I'm hoping that we do. That's what we do. We try to check the news media, but it's very hard because we don't have the millions and millions of audience that they do. But what we do have is the time and effort to go through these things and hopefully, share with our audiences the truth and the facts, and then they share it with someone else. And that's just how you start that wheel rolling. Like that's what I always say about the U.S. women's soccer. At first only a couple of people saw it, but when a couple of people were hit with the truth, right, it was the overwhelming truth. Like, oh my God, the truth is finally here. Now you got 4 million views. That's what we want to do.
My hope would be at some point, though, I don't know, journalism's been around a long time and it's not really changed. Maybe it's made a little bit of a move in this direction, but I have always thought that it would behoove somebody who wants to be a journalist, instead of studying journalism, which you basically learn on the job, that it would be better to become a specialist in something that you can cover. So a lawyer, somebody who has law knowledge, goes into legal reporting instead of just somebody goes to journalism school and learns how to shoot with a camera or whatever else, which I could teach you in 5 days, and then but has no complex knowledge of the law or anything really, and they're just shuffled from one story to the next story to the next story to the next story. Even somebody like myself who was covering a beat consistently, it took me years, probably 5 years on the environmental beat, where I finally realized what I didn't know. I started out thinking, this is easy. I get it. No problem. And then as I learned more, I was thinking, wait a second, like, is that even true? I don't know, because I heard that guy and that lady, and they're not saying the same thing. But I have no idea who's telling the truth, and I don't have time to figure it out. And I'd hand my boss scripts, and he'd be like, I see what he says. I see what she says. Who's telling the truth? And I would look at him and be like, are you kidding me? How am I supposed to know who's telling the truth? You give me 2 hours a day to figure out what's going on, and it was just a constant battle. And by the time I finally had the competence to actually do my job well, I quit because I was like, I can't do my job well here, So I was like, I'm done. So I could do a crappy job with, and I was fine because I didn't know what I didn't know. And then the second that I started learning more and I realized I was not doing the job I wanted to do, I tried to reformat that. They wouldn't, that was crazy to them. And I was like, I just can't work here anymore. And I think that happens to a lot of people when they start having these awakenings. Maybe people will, I don't know, decide like, I want to be like Nate the lawyer, but I'm going to go reformat corporate news and I'll go to law school and then I'm going to go. Because I did have an intern my last year who was getting her PhD in, I think it was oceanography, and she wanted to go in science reporting. So I don't know how she's going to pay for the PhD going into journalism, but I don't know, probably oceanographers don't make that much either. So she's going to take that knowledge and just cover oceanography as a journalist, which I think that makes a lot of sense. You know the subject at hand very, very well, but most of them are just not equipped to handle complex topics like this or really anything else that's complex, whether that has to do with geopolitical issues, medicine, you name it.
Yeah. And you know what one of the biggest things about, because I think journalists is like translators of information. Like they'll have the person who actually is an expert at the topic tell them, and they have to kind of tell everyone else. So it's kind of like they're that conduit. But sometimes, and I think this is important, from which the point that you're making is that if that happened to be if that journalist was a lawyer, then that journalist would be better equipped to then distill the information, because that's essentially what I do. I take these complex issues, just like this issue that happened on Friday. It's extremely complex, and just take it and just massage it to where I'm giving you the important pieces of it, but not leaving out things that you need to know to really be informed. And it's difficult to do that if you don't know the topic in an intimate way, right? If you don't understand these little twists and turns, you're just going to, you're going to tell your audience what someone else told you instead of you going to the documents and looking for yourself, because you just don't understand it.
Yeah, totally. And then that's why I think they believe that having these pundits or commentators that come on, they book them. I used to do that for Fox. Oh, we need a terror expert. We need this expert. And you just call them in. But the problem is you don't know who's bullshitting you because you don't know the topic well enough. You don't know the other side. So they could just be selling you some crazy and you don't know. You don't know how to hold them accountable, really. And the whole like gotcha idea, it's usually superficial pushback anyway. If you really wanted to understand complexities, I don't know. I just feel like when I watch even the times when they think they're bringing on the different perspectives and they're having people argue with each other, that the journalist or personality seems ill-equipped to even handle the debate and to move it in a direction that would actually elevate the conversation and be helpful versus just making for good television.
Yeah, but don't forget, a lot of times when people go in, I think when the news tries to cover these stories, like you're saying, you have a limited amount of time and you're trying to get the most amount of clicks, the most amount of views, and in that particular time space. So I do understand the struggle, because I deal with the struggle. It's hard when you're making like an hour video and nobody wants to watch it, but under 10 minutes that everybody wants to watch it. So those time constraints are real for everyone. But I do think I don't think the news media is constrained in the same way. I think they're constrained more by laziness. I think it's easy to put out the false narrative. I think it's easy to make people feel good about what you're putting out. But I think it's hard. I think it's extremely hard to then take that next level and say, let's look at this. What's the truth? And how can we get it out in a factual way that we know that we can stand behind? Because right now, like even with the Kyle Rittenhouse and the Ahmaud Arbery stuff, there's so much misinformation out there. And then the first thing you'll say is, where's this misinformation coming from? It's coming from the news media. And that's the scary part about this.
So before we go back to Arbery, could you respond to this? Rittenhouse was a vigilante. He would have been found guilty in most states, not going to Wisconsin. I think you disagree with that, but I'll let you handle it. I do have one question though related to that. because I don't know how you would legally determine any of this, but when Matt Orfalo was on talking about his videos that he's been doing about Kenosha, his argument against that was to say that when you're a vigilante, if you're defining it this way, it would be like somebody taking the law into their own hands. Is that what people do when they start burning down businesses? So is everybody there a vigilante? So if you start, dishing out the vigilante argument, now you're left with just a bunch of vigilantes that, I don't know. I'm just curious what you think about that, because could you also respond to Danny?
Yeah, well, I see. I think Danny labeling Kyle as a vigilante, I think, is incorrect, because I think that label is based on a misunderstanding of the facts. Number one of the biggest misconceptions about the whole Rittenhouse case is that Rittenhouse went to a protest, right? He went to a protest with a gun. And another big misunderstanding is that he went with an illegal gun. And you'll hear a lot of people say, well, he shouldn't have been there anyway. So I wanted to dispel the rumors. First, Rittenhouse didn't go to a protest. He went to a car lot. And the car lot was actually not at the site of the protest. The protest was a couple of blocks down. So what happens is police corralled the protesters and forced them to come down to where Kyle was at. So the protest came to Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse didn't go to the protest, which kills a lot of that whole vigilante thing, because he didn't go to the protest with a gun just going around. Second, a vigilante is someone who's out there, like we had what's known as the Guardian Angels here in New York, and they were like a sub police force, because our police force was horrible. So you had regular citizens put on like uniforms to go out there and try to fight crime like Batman. Batman would be the utmost vigilante as possible, right? Somebody who's taking the law into their own hands, out there beating people up and arresting them. That's not what Kyle Rittenhouse was doing. Kyle Rittenhouse was someone who went to the car source. The protest came to him, and he was legally allowed to be there, and his weapon was legal. So he was someone who was just like anyone. He had a legal right to be in the street, and he had a legal weapon. And at that point, that does not, in any world, in any state, loses his right to self-defense, because he was attacked, right? He was attacked. He didn't go in and attack anybody. He was attacked. So I hate this analogy, but this analogy was used the other night, and I thought it was a really good analogy to it. Let's say there's a frat house, and you have a woman who goes to that frat house, and she has a legal right to be there because she's been invited. And now something happens where maybe there's a sexual assault or something that happens. And then you say, well, she shouldn't have been there because she knew it was a dangerous situation going to the frat house. That kind of stuff happens in the frat house and being young. And I would say, well, in that case, why blame the person I don't believe you should blame the person who goes to the situation for somebody else violating their rights. And I think in the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, he was there. He was legally allowed to be with a weapon. He was legally allowed to have, and someone chased him down and lunged for his weapons while screaming, "I'm going to kill you." It's like, in which world is that not? In which world is that okay? And then we're blaming him because he was in a place he had a legal right to be in. Again, the vigilante, the calling him a vigilante, I just think it's just misinformed, because that person just doesn't really understand the facts of the case.
Okay, how about this? Why is jury nullification not part of jury instructions? I don't even know if I know what. Don't hate me for this, but I don't even know if I know what jury nullification means.
All right, essentially, jury nullification used to happen back in the 50s or 40s. Actually, even before that, before the 1950s. Remember in black, like when I don't know if you remember the case of Emmett Till, but there used to be cases where all white juries would refuse to convict white people who killed black people in the South, right? And no matter what the law is, so the white person can get up there on the stand and say, "Yeah, I killed them," right? And then it goes to the jury, because we got to be convicted by a jury of the peers. The jury would say, "Well, so what?" Right? Not guilty. So that's jury nullification, where the jury just disrespects the law. They just say, "We're not going to follow the law. We're going to go against anything." So here in the Rittenhouse in the Arbery case, people are advocating that the jury go against the law. Say, "Okay, we don't agree with the law, so we're going to find them not guilty anyway." Two things. Number one, it's not the jury has the lawful ability to do it. They do not. They can do it legally, but lawyers cannot advocate for it. So I can't go as an attorney. I can't, as an officer of the court, I can't go and say and advocate for the jury to nullification. I'm supposed to be, as an officer of the court, I have to say the jury is supposed to follow the law. So if I argue jury nullification as an attorney, I could be disbarred for that, right? You're not supposed you're supposed to, advocate for them following the law. So that's jury nullification, and that's why they are not a part of the jury instructions, because even though it's the ability of the jury to do that, it's high. They'll tell you this is not what you do. You do not. No, juries are supposed to follow the law as the judge gives it to them, even if they don't like it, even if they don't agree with it. They're supposed to follow the law.
That's really interesting. As you were talking, I was just thinking about what if that did become a new sort of phenomenon, like we see the Supreme Court. We always hear it now, right? Legislating from the bench, basically, because I feel like Congress is doing nothing, and so everybody's just suing left and right, and so the courts are doing the politics. I guess for us, I just didn't even think about, like, well, so what happens if you end up having jurors that end up taking that on as like a regular? That seems like that could lead to a ton of chaos.
Oh yeah, well, you haven't even heard about the runaway grand jury, because for people who don't know, there's grand juries are the ones who indict you, and for whatever crimes. But sometimes you have runaway grand juries where the grand jury takes the law into its own hand. They'll indict the prosecutor, they'll indict everybody. They'll just go start indicting people like crazy, because they have the power to do it. So our system is really set up where the people have the power, the ultimate power in these instances. And I think the Kyle Rittenhouse case is a beautiful example of that, where, you had this young, actually he was mixed. He was half Hispanic white kid shoot 3 other white people. And the prosecutor's trying to railroad this kid, and a jury of his peers under the pressure of people saying, we're going to burn down your community, right? In the courthouse, screaming out in front of the courthouse, sat there for 3 days and said, we understand the how people are going to say this, and we understand the threats that people are going to make, and that it may happen, right? They got 500 National Guard troops. That people were concerned about that. And you know what they said? We're going to do what's right. We're not going to let the mob take this one kid. We'd rather sacrifice this city than sacrifice this one innocent life. And I think people really need to appreciate what that jury had to go through, what that jury had to do, because they were being followed by MSNBC, right? Under all of that, they still went out there and they said, we won't give up this one life to appease this mob, right? We'll go down together. And that's our system.
So you've talked a lot about, and I think it's for anyone who's paying attention, it's pretty obvious the media misses in that case. What are one or two, maybe whatever you've seen when it comes to Arbery? Have there been narratives that have come out of that case that you feel okay, walk us through that?
Yeah. The first one is Arbery was this avid jogger who was just jogging naturally down the street, and was such a great guy, right? And everybody knew this was a great guy. That is what the media wants to portray, but those are lies. Arbery, and I could say this, and I think Arbery was killed, and I think his killers are going to go to jail, rightfully so. But the truth is, and even today, the prosecutor had to just say, all right, let's just cut the BS. But the truth is, Arbery was a prowler. He was someone who was going on other people's property, and it was likely that he had many, multiple thefts in that community. That's who Arbery was. He wasn't some random. You don't jog in people's houses in the middle of the night, right? You don't jog, it's at 1 o'clock in the morning into somebody's living room. That's not a jogger, right? And it's so bad about the whole jogging narrative. Think about this. In court, they can't even refer to Arbery as a jogger because there's no evidence that he ever jogged in the community. Nobody ever saw him jogging, right? No one. Only time people saw him is going in and out of people's houses. So that's one of the big things about that case, is that it was just people wanted to make him seem like someone he was not, instead of just saying, hey, we know this is a flawed person, but he still didn't have to be killed.
It's interesting. I don't know. Maybe I'm just relating these two in my mind, but it was interesting to hear the judge in the Rittenhouse case say, if I'm correct, that you can't call the people who Rittenhouse shot victims, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't that part of the? And so in this case, you're not allowed to call Arbery a jogger. Is that common, where the judge says, like, you can't use this language, you can't use that language? I don't know if I'm just paying more attention now, or if that's a new thing.
No, well, it's always been that way, and the reason why is that, well, first, they sound similar, but they're two different things. First, the victims. Generally, in criminal cases, you can call the victims victims, but when you have a self-defense issue, right? When you have a self-defense, excuse me, that Kyle was claiming self-defense. So now there's an issue of calling them victims where they may not be victims. Like Joseph Rosenbaum was definitely not a victim, but to call them victims would essentially be saying that Kyle is guilty, because for them to be victims, you have to have a perpetrator who have victimized them, right? This person's the victimizer, these are the victims. And that's the conclusion the jury is there to figure out, whether he was acting in self-defense or not, whether they were actually victims. So generally, you'll see the judge will allow alleged victims, but most courts, and in some courts, in a self-defense case, would say, well, they're not victims yet, because that's what the jury has to decide. So we're just going to call these people by their names. But now, when it comes to the witnesses, like in that case, you could call them looters and rioters, but only if there's evidence that they were actually looting and rioting. For instance, Joseph Rosenbaum, he's setting dumpsters on fire, screaming the N-word, and challenging people with guns. And even the people there who were BLM said he was a looter and a rioter. So now, with all that evidence, then yeah, he was a looter and a rioter. But with the Ahmaud Arbery case, the objection from the defense, which I think was a good objection, was like, hey, you can call him a jogger, but we have to have a reasonable basis for that belief that he was a jogger. You can't just say he's a jogger just to say it. You got to give us a reasonable basis of belief. What would that be? Did people see him jog? What type of clothes was he wearing? What time of day was he jogging? Did anybody see him jog? Matter of fact, did his neighbors even say he jogged? No one says he's jogging, so just saying that he's a jogger was misleading at best, because there was no evidence to support the fact that he jogged at all. That's where they got, and that's kind of why they weren't allowed to call him a jogger in that case. And that was the reason why they were not able to call the victims they're not victims technically, but the people who were shot in the Rittenhouse case victims.
Do we have any idea how the jogging storyline started?
I'm thinking they saw
remember, like,
the video.
Everybody was wearing T-shirts after that was like, running is not a crime. And, I remember there was just so much anger after that, because it was just this clear case of just somebody just jogging down the street. Seemed like in broad daylight,
Yeah, but I think most people, if they realize that this guy's been caught on cameras multiple times over like months and months and months, this guy, and I think it's a key point. Arbery terrorized this community. This community was terrorized with him burglarizing these places and going into these places. So it wasn't like he was unknown. I think when you see the video of him running down and the truck stops him, I'm thinking people just saw him running down and just clutched onto that. But he was definitely no jogger. Anybody who's telling you that is misleading you. And the court, and that's why I love the court documents and just dealing with the court, because if he was a jogger, they'd be screaming that in court. But in court, they're making sure they're screaming, no, he was not a jogger, because there was no evidence that he ever jogged, So
have there been any other points in the case that you think the media missed or slanted?
Yeah, I think when it comes to media because that's the left-leaning media, with the whole jogging thing, to try to make him look so innocent. On the right, we do have there are a couple of issues. One is whether the citizen's arrest issue. And whether a citizen's arrest, you need probable cause versus reasonable suspicion. And it gets a little technical, but I'll see if I can just make it as simple as possible. Reasonable suspicion is, when a cop pulls someone over on the highway for a traffic violation, that's simply like reasonable suspicion. I'm pulling you over. Reasonable suspicion is, I have someone who I don't know if they've committed a crime or not, but I'm going to investigate. Generally, people knows the standard from Terry stops, or stop and frisk, where the cop stops and frisks you, and if they don't find nothing, they let you go. That's known as a Terry stop, and that's done under reasonable suspicion. I have somebody who's acting suspiciously, but I don't know if they committed a crime or not, so it's an investigatory tool. But that's only available to law enforcement. Then you have probable cause. Now, the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause means I have someone and I have a crime that I think they've actually committed. So I actually have the crime, where reasonable suspicion, I don't know what crime, but probable cause, I have a crime. And then I can arrest you based on probable cause. So in the Arbery case, a lot of the right wingers would say, well, you only need reasonable suspicion to arrest Ahmaud Arbery. And that's just not true. It's the court said it, their defense attorneys said it, the prosecution said, like everybody in the court says you need probable cause. And even till today, you still have people who are going to say it's reasonable suspicion, being wrong, being 100% wrong. And I understand why they're saying that, because it makes, if that was the standard, then the McMichaels would be less likely to be found guilty. But unfortunately, it's not the standard. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to be found guilty.
Tell me a little bit about the part I heard where the judge was saying that it has to be a felony for you to chase after somebody that you didn't see the crime happen in your person. Am I making this up, or did I hear that correctly?
No, yeah. You heard it correctly. What happens is that for the citizens arrest law, this is the way it works. If the first part of the law allows a citizen to arrest a person for an offense. Now, that offense could be a misdemeanor or a felony. So if a misdemeanor occurs, then I can arrest you right there, as long as that crime happens in my presence and I arrest you immediately after the commission of that crime. But if the person runs away, so I say, hey, you're under arrest for it, and the person runs away, I can only chase that person if they committed a felony. I can't chase that person if they committed a misdemeanor. So that's what the court was saying.
Okay, right.
I can, if you want to chase misdemeanors, you can't. But if you want to chase people who committed felonies, you can.
So what they were thinking that Arbery did was a misdemeanor, and thereby we're not allowed to chase him, but they did, and that's the rub there.
Well, the rub with them is that the judge was explaining that if, let's say, for instance, it's Monday and this thing happens and it's a felony, which we'll give felony, and the person runs away and we don't catch him that Monday, right? My right to conduct the citizen's arrest extinguishes when you get away, right? So I can, even if I chase you and you escape and you get away, my right to arrest you extinguishes once you get away and I don't arrest you that day. So let's say I see you a week later. Can I arrest you a week later for that crime you committed back then? And that's what the law does not allow. The law says, no, you can't. You can't arrest them even if you see them in the future, because your right to arrest them extinguished that day. So that was the rub. And that's the McMichaels' whole defense. Their defense is we're arresting Arbery for a crime he committed 2 weeks earlier. And the law does not allow that.
I see. Okay. Any other media misses before I ask you my next question about that case?
Nothing really too crazy, but obviously everybody's turning it to their favorite talking point. So if you're talking on the left, Arbery is this innocent young wannabe Air Force pilot, and I love the excuse that his mom gave of why he was going into these houses in the middle of the night searching for stuff, that he wanted to build a house for his mother, so he wanted to look at the house and see how it was being built. But the interesting thing is that he was going in the middle of the night where he couldn't see anything. So how could he want? So it's just insane. But yeah, it's, I think we know what the mainstream media is going to paint him out to be an innocent child, and the right-wing media is going to paint him out to be a horrible person. But the truth is somewhere in between. The truth is that Ahmaud Arbery was a burglar, and unfortunately, but he still didn't deserve to die.
One of the things that I think is really common with cases like this is you'll have a pool camera, you may even have a pool reporter, and everybody's taking the feed from like one person, or every local station is taking their affiliates' talking points, or maybe even the affiliates are taking the Reuters or AP wire. So it's maybe 4 reporters that are feeding the entire country everything about the case. And so, high profile, maybe there's double that around. Yeah. But I remember even Casey Anthony, I remember being outside her release from jail, and there were a lot of us, but even in that case, if say we weren't going to send somebody to court because we got to cover this and we don't have enough people to go to Orlando, we would just take the Wire's word for it. And then that's how these telephone games continue, because I don't know, maybe the people watching know this, but I don't think necessarily the average American understands how in some cases of very high significance, there are only a few people that are basically writing the news, because we're just recycling the talking points and just copying and pasting and putting down. And, you know, if that person made one mistake, it's going to get made over and over and over again. And then now, if you're going to be the person to correct that, you're going to be like the lone wolf who's going to be stared at like, well, are you sure? I mean, how do you know? And how do you even push back on it if you're not in Georgia or you're not in Wisconsin? You know, you're not there to see it. You're just a producer somewhere else. You're like, well, this is what they say, so this is what I'm going to write. And it almost seems like the more significant of, you know, importance, or just the more attention a story is getting, it's likely, right, to be reported on all over the country, instead of it just being like a local news station covers its local news, right? It's going to cover, Seattle will cover Rittenhouse, even though it's in Wisconsin, because it's a case of high significance, right? But those are then the cases that end up having the worst reporting, because a station in Seattle is talking about something that happened in Wisconsin and they don't have somebody there. And it's just a few people that are pushing out the news for these very significant events, where you just don't have a lot of people there in person to check the bias of the handful of folks who are doing the reporting.
Yes. No, I definitely agree. It's weird, because the biggest issue I'm starting to see, especially trying to disseminate factual information, because I'm not a reporter. I don't go out there and go to the people. What I have found is that it seems like the news media just doesn't go that extra step and just check their sources or check the information they get. You know, a lot of times the reason why when I go out with a story, if I do, I'll go up with a point that's incorrect. It's usually because I trusted the news media and say, I'm going to run with their story. Like there was one piece that I did on Kyle Rittenhouse early on. And it was funny because they were like, oh, here's Rosenbaum interacting with Kyle early. Come to find out it wasn't even Kyle, it was someone else. But I had trusted the AP. And I'm like, oh my God, I trusted the AP. How stupid am I, right? Yeah, I'm the one who said, but I trusted because I thought they knew what they were talking about, but they hadn't. And that's what I'm talking about. But I honestly feel that most people who are even watching this don't have the time to check all the news sources to make sure that these things are accurate. They have us to rely on, or they have the news media to rely on. And it's a sad day in America when you can't just get factual information from the news media. You have to get the spin, you have to get the lies, and then when you find out when you find out what the facts are, you feel like you've been fooled. And that's where we're at right now. That's the world we unfortunately live in.
Right. It's just, I think in these cases, it's really important, and it's what you do, to go to primary source material, reading the documents, looking at the photos, the full spectrum of the video, not just a 10-second or 20 seconds cut for Twitter. Exactly. And so I don't think a lot of them are doing that. I like I was mentioning earlier, one of my final straws for my career was covering the Clean Water Act. And I got the Republican and I got the Democrat. And I thought, well, I really need to read the Senate report to understand what exactly is changing. Like, what were the concerns about the Clean Water Act, and are they valid? Instead of just Clean Water Act good, getting rid of it bad, or like changing it bad. Like everyone just assumes, well, I don't want dirty water. Of course the Clean Water Act must be awesome. And then not realizing that there are bureaucracies in it that may actually be harming the environment, because it's making it harder for, say, smaller farmers, for instance, to stay in business, and actually making it easier for corporate farms that are polluters and have attorneys that can and administrative people who can file the paperwork and whatnot. There's all kinds of stuff that happens behind the scenes of this stuff, but it's argued like Clean Water Act, right? So it's like, well, who wants dirty water? Of course the Clean Water Act's awesome. Keep it intact, go and get rid of it. So I really wanted to read this Senate report, and I just did not have time. There was no way I had time. And the other thing too is, whoever calls you back in a certain amount of time gets on the news, right? So you'll do. Right?
We got you.
It's like, you may not be the best person, but you're a warm body. Your voice sounds fine. Great. You're going on TV today. So yeah, that day I looked at one of my coworkers who had been in the business for a long time, 4 decades, and was very well known in the community, and said, I'm really frustrated because I need to read this report and I'm not going to have time. And then you go on at 5 o'clock and like, this is the news. Right. And I would like, if I could just go on and say, thanks, Greg, who's ever talked to me. Allison joins us live at 5 on the Clean Water. And I'd be like, thank you, Greg. Listen, I only had a couple hours to do this, so this is the best I could do. Roll that tape. Then I would be totally fine with it. But it's just like presenting yourself as an authority when you're not really, you're not. And like I said, the shift from paradigm A to paradigm B for me was paradigm A. I didn't realize that I needed to read the Clean Water Act, or that I didn't have time to do, or not the Clean Water Act, but that Senate report on it. And then paradigm B, it's like, I know now that I need to read this report, and now I know I don't have time to do it. And now I also know I'm presenting myself, in my opinion, disingenuously on the news, because I'm, people are assuming I've done my due diligence on this, and I really haven't. I'm just telling you what this person says and this person says, but both of them could be wrong. I don't know. True, yeah. They could both be wrong. So yeah, it's just like that primary source stuff, and actually understanding the topic and reading through the documents and seeing all the footage and doing that. It's just, it's the system, I feel like, is set up in order to keep people from doing that. And the second that you realize that's very problematic, you're out. You just leave. And the only reason you were in it was because you didn't see, you just couldn't, you were in the matrix and you didn't know. You're just doing the thing, and then the second you're just like, well, I can't stay here because because now I know I'm acting disingenuously. When I was acting like I thought I knew everything, at least I didn't know that I was missing all this stuff. But now that I know, now it's like negligent on my part. Continue.
I can just imagine how hard it is, because this is at one point there's going to be an ethical battle amongst yourself about, am I giving out good information, or how do I want to carry myself within this field? But I honestly think if people really want to get the real news and the real and understand the truth behind the stories, they come to us. If people want to continue to be lied to, they go to mainstream. And it's so fascinating to see people's eyes be opened up in a lot of these stories that we tell, because it is a shocking thing. Like your Antifa video, people think they know, but they really don't know. And then we're able to open their eyes to understanding the devil behind the details. And that's why I think a lot of the videos that we both produce, there was one I watched about, I'm not going to use the I word because I know the I word is horrible on YouTube, but it rhymes with Vectin.
Yeah, ivermectin. That's right.
Yeah. But one thing I learned so much from one of your videos. I was like, oh wow, I had bought into the mainstream news narrative that this was for this and this is for this and this is people are taking, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. So it's actually for people, and then I'm like, oh, duh, I was like, but again, they got me again. But who has the time to check everything? Right? Who has the time to check everything? We do.
It almost requires you to become paranoid, really. And to go back to, I forgot to finish my story. When I was dealing with that Clean Water Act case, and I turned to my coworker who had been in the business for a very, very long time and told her I was frustrated, her advice was to just repeat what NBC says because they're usually right.
Yeah.
And I finally had the awareness to know that it seems stupid looking back on it, that it took me a while to even get to that. But here I am, one of the only TV reporters in the entire country who specializes in environmental journalism. I know that a reporter in New York or Washington, D.C., who's just doing this for this one day and then tomorrow maybe doing something totally different, does not know more than I do about the environment, because it would be highly unlikely that they would know more than I do, because I cover it every day and I was one of maybe two. I think I may have been the only one. Wow. And so I thought no, I can't, I'm not going to just repeat that's the terrible idea. And it just goes to show how a lot of the people, like I said, in the system, they think that's totally fine, that you're just having, it's like imagine, I guess, I don't know if I'm going to fudge this analogy, but like you're a doctor and you've seen this patient for 15 years, the patient, you're like, you know what, but I'll just let that doctor in New York operate, just through the screen or something like that. I mean, it's like, why would I do that? I'm the person who knows this client better than anybody else. And so I was like, doesn't she know that they get it wrong and that, we're not totally sure what about their bias and all this other stuff? It was just not even in her mind that we could be repeating something problematic. And that it's not just like green lit because it came from NBC. Like it's just the gospel because it came from NBC. So that was disappointing to say the least. And I just remember being like, okay, like if that's the solution, not okay, let's hold Allison's story for tomorrow so she has time to read the Senate report. The solution was like, let's just recycle what NBC says. Then that solution just is not viable for me.
But let's not also get there's a time limit on getting this information out, because I fell victim to that before too. Where you say I just need to get it out because I want to be the first to get it out, so people have, people want to get it to me, and there's a balance there. But the problem is that like now I will not put out a story unless it's thoroughly vetted. I don't care how long it takes, right? But I think the news media, that's a different story, because ABC, NBC, they're all trying to compete with each other. So if NBC puts something out, their hope is that it's good enough so they can put it out at about the same time to grab some of those views and clicks from ABC. Because again, the first one who has the person who's the first to the line usually gets the whole breaking news story. This is, we're the only one that's really got it. So it's a dog eat dog world out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. And you're totally right that it's not like the independent world is completely void of some of these issues. I think that the benefit though is that if you want to, I know there's pressure to get on it first and to have a headline that people will click on, and
yes,
but if you want to, your video itself can reflect complexities and nuances that I think, and because you're a specialist, a lot of people like you, right? You're a specialist, this stuff, and you can go direct to the people. You're not going through an editor or like this is how we're gonna do the lower third and it has to say this. You can go direct to your audience, and I think the ability to just be more organic and unfiltered and not trying to please a corporation. Not that it doesn't matter. Obviously, like if you're doing this full time, your paycheck comes from it. And so you're thinking about that stuff. But I don't know. It's just been, for me, it's just been a lot different. There's some similarities, but you don't necessarily have to it doesn't have to become the idolatry that it is, I think, in legacy news, where it's like, it's all about the end product. Whether you know what you're talking about or all this stuff, it's like, just get it on, just get it done. And I don't know. I think, and I'll still have a job, right? It's usually like I'll still have a job regardless tomorrow if I'm in corporate news. And with you, I think, and me, it's like if we start just getting things grossly inaccurate all the time, eventually the audience is going to go, well, screw you, I'm out of here. Yeah. And you know what I mean? So it's like, you're not going to just have a job tomorrow. You answer to the people.
But I think that's good though. The fact that I have to because I don't have to be right. I want to be right. Right. I want to that when people look at my stuff, they can share with someone and find that, oh my God, this guy's got it right. This guy has a track record of getting it right. And if I get it wrong, I'll tell you, guess what? I got it wrong. And this is the reason why. And you need to understand. And that's something that you have to build an audience for, because again, a lot of people don't realize sometimes how tough it is to put a story out in the amount of time that we do. Like, for instance, the biggest story I've done, which was the U.S. soccer story. Well, even before that, the Breonna Taylor story, that took me like 2 or 3 weeks to just go through the documents, find the documents, read through the documents, understand, look at the maps, understand the whole picture about what happened, and then be able to put the story out in a 20-minute video. So I'm talking about looking at hundreds of documents and putting it in a 20-minute video that kept people's attention, right? And to do that is an extremely tough thing to do. But when you do it right, people appreciate it. And that's what I'm always striving for. I'm always striving to take that complex topic that everybody's got so misinformed with and give it to you in a nice 10 to 15-minute video. So you say, oh, that's the truth. And it'd be simple as pie.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, last question on Arbery before I let you go. It seems like you think that that father-son duo is going to go to jail. Is going to be found guilty and they're going to go to jail. What about the other guy? What do you think happens to him?
All right. So it's funny because the person who thought that McMichaels were going to get off like 100% was Robert Barnes, who I love. And I'll tell you guys this: Robert Barnes is probably one of the greatest attorneys in the country right now. Just hands down. I don't know what else you can say about the guy. So he was advocating that the McMichaels would probably get off based on how he was reading everything. But now, after this judge's ruling, he even says the McMichaels are going to jail and should look for a plea. So that change was like, oh, okay. That's how significant this ruling was. But the other guy, I think, unfortunately, today, in his lawyer's closing argument, his lawyer essentially said he was too stupid to understand what he was saying when he told police that he was trying to trap Arbery and falsely imprison him, and that he was just saying the wrong words but meant to say other things. So it's like when your attorney says that you're too stupid to understand what you're saying to the police because you said all these incriminating statements, it seems like he might be going down too. So I think they all are going down for felony murder at least. I think you may hear some acquittals on what's known as malice murder. In other words, the state overcharged them and said, well, they intended to kill Arbery. They went out there that day specifically to intend to kill Arbery. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they've proven that. So I think I would acquit on those charges. But the charges that I think they can't involve was falsely imprisoning Arbery because they were trying to conduct a false citizen's arrest. And for those of you who don't know, if you're trying to conduct a citizen's arrest and you're wrong as a citizen, you've just committed major felonies like either kidnapping or false imprisonment. And if somebody dies because you committed those felonies, then that's felony murder. And that's what I think the guy Bryant, who you're talking about, is going to get charged. He's going to get probably hit with felony murder and do the rest of his life in prison.
Okay, everybody should go watch. Are you doing another 8 hours tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm doing. Tomorrow they start at 8:30. Tomorrow, if you've never watched anything about the Arbery trial, tomorrow 8:30, the prosecution rebuts the defense's closing, and it's going to be spectacular, and the jury's going to get it. Most of the other lawyers, because I thought Kyle Rittenhouse was going to go a day for jury, they went 3. All the lawyers think that that they should be having a verdict either tomorrow or Wednesday. So tomorrow is going to be the last part of it, but Wednesday, I'm hoping Wednesday will be verdict, and then we'll move on from there. Because again, if the judges rule, what the judge said is true, then the jury is going to have at least no chance of the jury is going to have no other choice but to find them guilty of the felony murder counts, which means life in prison for all of them. So,
Nate the lawyer, always an honor to have you on. Everybody go to Nate's channel tomorrow and hang out with him. He's lonely. He needs somebody there to help him get through the 8 hours of closing arguments. But no, actually, as you said, tomorrow should be one of the better days to tune in. So, and can't get a better guide to get you through the process. Nate, thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks. No, thanks for having me on. This has been awesome. And so long to all the people in the chat, especially my haters. I love the haters. So but there's no haters.
I don't think you have very many haters. I was trying to pay attention to it, but
no, I don't. There's no haters in the chat. I'm just messing with the chat.
Yeah, somebody did say that your camera makes you look like a video game.
Oh.
Character. I don't know what video game, but for some reason, I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe it's because you have superheroes behind you.
I do. Yeah.
That's what Nate wears when he gets off camera.
Hey, matter of fact, what happened to your play button? Did you pop open the play button yet or no?
Oh no, but
what are you doing?
You got my address on it.
Oh, you can't show it now. You
I'm
pop
live.
that bad boy open.
Oh, are you?
Wow, Lynn doesn't even know I'm live right now. He just came and started drinking his bourbon. Wow. You want to say hi? Hi. You want to say hi to everybody? Oh,
hey everybody.
My babysitter. Where's the kid?
She's asleep.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, everybody.
My bad. I thought
here we
you
go.
were done.
Nate's an awesome guest. The headline should have started with his name for more views. I'll just next time I'm just gonna say Nate the lawyer. I won't even say what the topic is.
No, anyway. This has been awesome, and it's always a pleasure. And thanks again, Allison, for having me on. This was amazing, and we'll see what happens after this Arbery trial, because you got to have me back on to talk about if I was right. Now, for those of you who don't know in the chat, I have this amazing call streak, right? I've called like the past 20 cases straight down, and I've been right? So this Arbery case is going to be the last one. if I get it right, the streak continues. So we'll see.
I'm
We'll
glad
see.
you brought that up because I was planning on playing that to just sign us out of sign us out. Hang on one second, because this was your video to the haters. All right. Hang on, everyone. Just make sure you can hear it. Actually, hang on. I'm going to share it. I just got to make sure the audio is selected. Here we go. All right, here we go. This is Nate's message to the haters.
Oh, I'm in the car.
Yes. People hung jury. It might be hung. It might be this. No hung jury. All counts. Not guilty. Thank God for the jury. They took their time. 3 days. I thought it should be a day. I thought it should just be like a real quick thing. It took for days. Scared us all up. Had me scared. Had me shook up. Right? I was shook up about it. But at the end of the day, justice prevailed. Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty. All counts. Close the door. We heading on to Ahmaud Arbery because that case is headed to the closing arguments on Monday, and the jury's going to get that on Monday. But if you haven't heard, Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty. All counts. Game over. And I'm going to see you guys.
Nate, what are you wearing? Why are you wearing the headphones in that one? I have to ask.
Oh well, I had just come from the hospital because I'm getting supposed to be getting surgery on my eye. So, well, two things. So I couldn't really see my phone because they had
okay.
So I was trying to, and I just heard the verdict. So it was like I was. You know, it's one of those things where I wanted to give you just my raw emotions after hearing it. And it's interesting because I was called a white supremacist after that. I'm like, well, why am I a white supremacist for that video? What are you talking about? I'm happy for the verdict because I think it was a just verdict. And it's sad because no matter what you say about, no matter what you think about Kyle Rittenhouse, there is no way if you actually looked at the trial and looked at the evidence, you thought that this kid shouldn't have been let go. It's just like that. That's the truth. And it's unfortunate because the truth doesn't matter nowadays. It's just about the spin. So, but I'm about the truth, and I'm still going to spit it, no matter where it leads.
Well, I loved your video. I saw that, and my husband and I were dying laughing watching it because like, F the haters. Sometimes you gotta tell you just gotta tell the audience like it is, Nate. So anyway, all right. Thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.
Peace.